I don't really know how else to say it, so I'm just going to say it. $200,000 was stolen from our town. And it's easy to point to the culprit, but it's more important to understand how so we can make sure it never happens again. My name's Elijah Johnson. Welcome to Facing Woodland. So, what happened? This is a tale in 3 parts. Part 1, we're going to talk about the heist. Part 2, we're going to take a little detour, talk about the weed shop. You're going to say, hey, that's not heist related, but it's city related, so this is Facing Woodland. It's worth covering. And then part 3, we're going to come right back around, and I'm going to explain to you the culprits and what we can do as the city of Woodland to make sure this never happens again. So, the heist. How our money got stole. God, how did our money got stole? How did our money get stole? These are good questions. Probably the same question over and over again, but it's true. $200,000 being pilfered sounds like someone just walked into our treasury and grabbed stacks of cash. That's not what happened. See, what happened is Mayor Finn fired his administration, allowing them to collect their severances. He fired them without cause, allowing them to collect their severances. That's why it feels like a theft. But he did it because he was scared. Now, he had no reason to be scared. I think it's very petty. I don't think it's actual fear. What has happened is throughout the entirety of Todd Deinhardt's campaign for mayor, God, I can't believe we have to go back this far, there was calls from Mayor Finn's supporters, both on city council and off, for some level of assurance that Todd Deinhardt wasn't going to fire the administration whole cloth when he took power. And Todd was very quick to constantly say that, he had no intention of doing it. He'd want to at least review their employment to make sure, they didn't need to, but he had no reason to believe he would do this. He spoke with me privately. Shout out to Todd. What's up, Deinhardt? Mayor, to be polite here. He spoke with me privately and still never, seemed to allude that that was his decision or opinion in any way. Conversely, the people who were terminated, Tracy Coleman and Peter Boyce, were spoken of at the very least proudly, at the very most proudly, at the very least benignly. No one actively, at least in my travels, seemed to despise them or think they did a poor job or had inferior performance in any way, shape, or form. So the motive to terminate them, triggering severance contracts by the new folks coming in, doesn't really seem to be there. So then the question becomes, why were you scared about it? Well, the reason they were scared about it is because when Mayor Finn became Mayor Finn, he fired the previous administration. Now, whether he did it because he felt a personnel change was necessary, or whether he did it because he felt that as a new mayor, you should fire the previous administration, it doesn't matter. He took a, well, if I'll do it, you'll do it mentality, and just instilled in his supporters this fear that people were going to be fired. And when that fear wasn't realized, or when it didn't seem like it would be realized, they turned it into a self-fulfilling prophecy so that they could make sure that they were getting fired on their terms. Well, they thought to themselves, if Deinhardt's going to fire us anyway, let's fire ourselves. Then we're going out on our terms, and he can't do anything about it. And that, my friends, is what happened. Also, Bolo's budget got cut, which isn't a theft of an employee so much as a theft of a dog. It's very weird. Essentially, Lieutenant Ortiz might be off on this on some nuts and bolts, because I'm working with partial info. But my understanding is that Lieutenant Ortiz was given sole ownership of Bolo, and the budget for her position was zeroed out, which means that the police department would be unable to pay her. So she left, allowing her to go get another position elsewhere, which apparently she already has. So, for those Bolo haters out there, I'm not one of them. Congrats, dog's gone. For those Bolo lovers out there, hey, it's a bummer, dog's gone. I'm in that camp. And for those of you who are indifferent to Bolo, they stole our dog. I'm a little mad about that one. I know it's a petty thing, but they did. A dog got stole. Our dog got stole. It's a city dog. It's my dog, too. Bolo's a good dog. It's gone now. That's a bummer. So that also happened. We're going to get a new lieutenant. I don't know what the time frame on that is. I think a lot of things happened quickly, so we're working on it. They're working on it. I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here talking about it. So we collectively as the city are doing something. I personally am, as Elijah, am doing nothing. I want that to be overwhelmingly clear. So that is what happened. Let's talk about the weed store.
Where them patriots at? Where them patriots at? Where them patriots at?
The Planning Commission voted to allow the weed store where it is, which, if approved, would mean the weed store would have to be granted a business on account of there'd be no reason not to grant them a business license, since, of course, it was zoned and regulated to be there. That went 3-1, and then at every city council meeting I've been on about the weed store, there's been a lot of support for it. I've been clear before, but I want to be clear again. I don't smoke pot. I don't drink alcohol. My issue with the banning of John's weed shop is not economic, although you can make arguments for it. My issue is just on moral consistency. It is hypocritical to take issue with weed as an impairing substance and not with alcohol, which is what our town is doing. That's it. That's my only gripe. If you made it a dry town, I wouldn't care. But when you allow a hard liquor store next to a family coffee shop where I'm expected to take my kids, and then you go to city council meetings and say, well, I don't want kids to see the marijuanas, it makes you look like a hypocrite because you are being hypocritical to say that. That's my beef. That's all it is. Again, if you'd made it a dry town, if you had at any point in Woodland's history stood up and said, I don't like impairing substances, they all should be banned, gosh dang it, and we've taken a stance on weed, we should take a stance on alcohol, that's the way to go, then yes, obviously, you should do that. But that's not happening, and it never has happened. So it's clear that this is a biased, petty, short-sighted, poorly thought out, obviously hypocritical stance, and anyone who supports this type of inconsistent behavior is actively engaging in poor legislation. And that is my complaint. So how the hell does this tie into a theft? Well, we have to talk about
where them patriots at? Where them patriots at? Where them patriots at?
These things don't happen in a vacuum, and these people don't rule unopposed. What I mean by that is the city council doesn't just arbitrarily do what it wants without any input from anybody. In fact, it gets lots of input. That's what the meetings are for. That's why you have public speaking time. That's why you allow people to speak. The whole purpose of that isn't just to let someone vent their frustration so then you can go, and do what you were going to do anyway. It's for you to take what they're saying into consideration if they're making a point. So how does the theft and the weed store get tied in on this? Is there a commonality here? There is actually. In fact, both of these things were approved by City Council. City Council has viciously denied weed at every opportunity and also openly approved the contract extensions that were executed allowing a pilfering of our coffers. In both of those instances, the town came out in ardent, opinionated support of the weed store and opposed to the extensions. Young and old, men and women, everyone stood at those podiums and have said pretty consistently for months now, hey, we'd like a pot shop, please, and followed up with, at the time, hey, I don't want these contract extensions, please. I feel like it's bad legislation. The city council denied them all. But this is the thing. City council isn't city council. It's not one entity. It's 7 separate voices. So I think it's important as we talk about city council, we have to have a bit of a roll call.
Where them patriots at? Where them patriots at? Where them patriots at?
All right, first things first, we have their new faces. Douglas Friedmark, Sr. and Gabe Houston. or Friedmark. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I'm doing my best. We all make mistakes. Apologies. So, they're new, which means they weren't really talking a lot about either of these issues. And from what I've seen of Gabe, he's doing his best to represent the will of the people as he sees it. And as a city representative, he's getting maybe a glance at a different set of Woodland than other people are getting. You know, he's talking to different people. Although him and Terry go to the same church. I'm going to come back to Terry. Douglas and I might disagree on what we should do about pot. I'm for it. He's opposed to it, but he's listening and taking these oppositions into consideration. I can respect that. Plus, he's new, so I don't really have anything one way or the other. But it's clear that he's trying to, think about the things that are being brought to his attention before he approves or denies them. And on that regard, I can respect his approach to trying to be considerate for the weight of these issues. Next, we have Melissa Dowdy. Dowdy she just won re-election, and she's been alarmingly consistent that her job is to try to listen to the people as best she can. Which means when you're up there saying something, she's doing her best to pay attention to you. She might not agree with you, but she's trying to pay attention to you. And that means she's trying to be a good representative, and I can respect that. Going on the list again, we have Monty Hall. Monty Smith. I'm so sorry, Monty. That's not fair to me. That's not fair to you. It's terribly fair to me. It's not fair to you. Monty tries his best to meet in the middle, which is he said on the record, welcome to compromise where nobody wins. And takes strength of character to sit up and say, I know this isn't good, but it's also the most thing that we can all have that no one will like. Fair. It's fair. These are guys who are trying to pay attention. And in my previous sort of city council rundowns, I think that he's done a pretty fair job of trying to stop poor legislation where he sees it, trying to be even-handed. Reasonable. And now we have Carol Rounds and Terry Hall. Carol, I haven't really heard her say much one way or the other. Not that she doesn't talk a lot, I'm just not, for whatever reason, I'm not listening or picking it up. And I'm sorry, Carol, if you're making statements and I'm not hearing them. That's a me problem. I will do my best in the future. But as it stands, you guys, I lump you and Terry in a similar class, but Carol is at least not on record as what I would give my lowest score of city council governance to Terry Hall, who's on record saying that we're children and he's an adult. I find that detestable. Firstly, he was appointed, never elected. Secondly, he ran unopposed. So, it's not like people in Woodland want this. Somebody in Woodland decided it would be a good idea. And then we just didn't pony up opposition fast enough to this concept. So now, we have a guy up there who thinks that the people who stand up at the podium are objectively worse than the people behind the bench. And that's tyrant talk. Don't like that. That's very British. It's a very British way to do things. That's loyalist behavior, and as a patriot, I can't stand for it. So, I don't like it, and if that's the kind of governance that leads in to how he does things, I don't like the way he does things on city council. I know that a few people on city council watch these. I know Gabe does. So if this gets to, the people that I'm speaking poorly of, your Terry Halls, your Carol Rounds, I want you guys to understand something. I want to be proud of you. I do. I want to like my representatives up there. I want to think that they're doing their best, and while we might not agree, they're paying attention, and they're listening to people. So when I speak critically of you, it's not an attempt to hurt your feelings because we don't see eye to eye on the weed shop. You want to know how this all ties in? We have to talk about how it all ties in.
Where them patriots at? Where them patriots at? Where them patriots at?
I was there in Chambers when the severance package extensions were being offered to be voted on. A lot of people were there. young and old, men and women, they all said don't do it. In fact, there was no support from the city for those extensions. There wasn't a single person in those meetings that stood up behind that podium and said, hey, you know what? You're right. They have earned it. Give them these extensions. This is a good idea. Nobody said that. Not a single person said that. And while Aaron Alderman and Deanna Holland might have spitefully agreed with the mayor and stabbed at Woodland from beyond the grave with their final breath, you know what? Terry Hall and Carol Rounds could have and should have taken that into consideration, and they didn't. Those passed 4-3, which means it wasn't just the mayor's best friends, Aaron Alderman and Deanna Holland, voting for this stuff. Other city council members were voting for it. They were approving it against the town's recommendation, without any support from the city. And that approval cost us $200,000. It cost us a public works director. It cost us a city administrator. It slowed down the town, and it's your fault. It's your fault because we asked you, and we begged you, and we pleaded for you to not do this. It is bad governance and bad administration, and you just didn't care. It was more important that you got what you wanted than that you listened to what the town had to say. I also say town, not city, because, we're small groups of people. I view us more as a town. We're tiny. We kind of all know each other. So when I go into a city council meeting where the legalization of marijuana here, the ending of its prohibition, is on the table, and I see a dozen people speak out in support of it, and one dissenting voice, continuing to say, nope, not at all, never going to happen, it boggles the mind. Your poor decisions have cost us $200,000. That's you. You did that. I didn't do it. In fact, I recall telling you at the very least to table it until February, where the mayor wouldn't have been able to fire anybody because he would no longer have been mayor. Todd Deinhardt could have considered whether or not he should keep them or release them and still not have been held to these contract extensions. I mean, they earned it, after all. It's worth it. But it seems like we just cut them a big windfall. And now we're thinking about litigating. So I want to say that when we're trying to litigate this litigation, can we sue him? It's easy to think that he wronged us. But if I was the mayor's attorney, and I'm not an attorney, but if I was the mayor's attorney, here's the argument I'd make. I'd walk right into that courtroom and I'd say this, something close to it. Your Honor, city voted to extend these extensions. This was a city council decision. They approved all of these requests. Mayor Finn shouldn't be held, my client, there we go, shouldn't be held accountable for making a bad personnel decision. He fired somebody without cause. Yeah, as is his right as the mayor to do so. If there's financial impacts on the mayor terminating someone, well, city council is the one approving the financial impact. If there's any fiduciary damage, the city did it to itself. And then if I was a good lawyer, I'd have a legal code or a precedence to cite for this. They probably exist. I don't have to dig up the RCWs. I'm not an attorney. And if you think, that's kind of a reasonable argument you just made, hey, guess what? An attorney's going to do a much better job than me. Because, they're an actual lawyer, not just some weirdo dressed like a lunatic talking into a GoPro, for a couple hundred people. I think if there's a good stance to litigate, we should do it. But I do want you to understand that just eats into the margin of getting this money back. If we can get this $200,000 in severance packages back, don't know if we can. Litigating for it's going to cost, let's say, $60,000. So we're really only going to get $140,000 in severance packages back. And that number gets lower the more we spend litigating, to a point where we don't get anything back and maybe it's a net cost. It's a Pyrrhic victory. I don't think it's good unless our attorney has credible merit, but I don't think we do because we voted to do this. We put the bullets in the gun and gave it to a lunatic who'd been saying for the better part of a year, I'm gonna shoot you. So yeah, I guess we kind of get what we deserved here. But when the city is full of people who ask you, please don't do this, you should listen to them. Oh my gosh, it's not hard. This is basic stuff. So at this point, I want to wrap this up, and I want to be positive, and I want to tell you what you, the citizen watching this, can do. You can remember. That's it. That's all you got to do. You can remember that Terry Hall said that you're a child, that you're not capable of making an adult decision. That's for him to do. And then you can remember that he said that right before he didn't listen to anything the city told him and cost the town $200,000. You can remember that Carol Rounds was right there with him, agreeing with all the stuff he agreed to, who's never made a compelling argument on record that at least I can find for why we're doing these things that it seems like a lot of the city's against. You can remember this when it comes time to run against them, and you can put up your friends or yourselves to start campaigning. If you want my support, all you really got to do is say you won't do what they did. And when it comes time to vote, you can remember how they've been governing and you can vote against them. Because as it stands, it doesn't seem like they care enough to listen to anything you have to say. And one of them is on record saying that they don't want to. That's the part that doesn't sit well with me. So I probably said it a lot. Sorry for repeating myself. But going forward, we have some cool stuff. I sat down with Jim Kelly in late December, and that interview's coming. I was going to upload it sooner, but then we lost Bolo. And him and I talked about Bolo for a good 5 minutes. So I wanted to touch base with him to make sure he didn't have any additional comments he wanted on record or, get his advice on what he thinks we should do with the interview. To his credit, he was more than happy to let everything stand and leave editorial decisions up to me. And I think, he's a good guy. I'm not going to change it. But just know that we talk about the dog because the dog was still here at the time. I met Bolo then. And it seems like it was a shock to kind of everybody other than Mayor Finn and Lieutenant Ortiz that this had happened. I've also got an interview scheduled coming up with Joe Kent. Keep an eye out for that. Hopefully that'll go well. And then, we'll start 2024 off right. I've got some fun stuff in the pipeline, and we'll talk more about how those as they happen. And I want to stop doing city council rundowns, not because I think that they're bad, but because I just don't want this to be the city council recap show. So hopefully I can, and this is my big get, this is my white whale, people. Hopefully I can get Mr. B, talk about Planners Day. That would be a win for Facing Woodland. But, we'll take it one day at a time, and you should take it one day at a time. Just remember what they did, and, run against them when you have the opportunity. Maybe I will. Thanks for watching.